All right, I think we're going to get started on time. Keep coming on in. Well, first of all, I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to your organizations, because I think a great organization truly values the understanding of the learning opportunities it provides you, right? And it wouldn't have been possible without your organization allowing you to be here away from your day jobs. Thank you to your families for them to allow you to come here. I know it's not easy. I know every single time I have to go, I have to explain to my daughters why I need to go, why I want to go, because this is like school for me. This is a lot of learning. And I think thank you to each one and every one of you over here for choosing this session. This truly humbles me, because I know there's a lot of great sessions going on in parallel. So my promise to you is that I hope that this 1 hour becomes a great use of your time. If it doesn't, please feel free to let me know at the end of the session as well. My name is Lavkesh Babar. I live in San Francisco Bay Area, and I work with some of the largest accounts that Tableau works with. I'm a sales consultant, and that basically means that I help different companies just understand how to deploy Tableau. Now, I said this guy has a little story. His name is Torty, short for tortoise. It has a story and has a message as well. So I'll tell you the story first. Those are my daughters. That's the day that we brought our younger daughter, Anjali, to our house. And my other one, Nivi, I think she's trying to make sure that she is for real. It's a real life person. But that day, we also brought a present for Nivi, which was Torty. Actually came with a book. Now, as they grew up, the elder ones typically being more giving, more big-hearted, she actually gave Torty to Anjali, who I think is trying to figure out, which I think this is a different tortoise, by the way, how to give him a bath with air. But I guess that worked. They're both grown up. This is actually just from last week, and learning to love different animals in different ways. Now, Torty sometimes travels with me. This is actually Torty last year in New Orleans. This is a little bit of home for me. My daughters want me to feel comfortable when I'm away from them. My younger daughter actually loves to sleep with Torty every single day, but on special occasions, she says, Torty should travel as well, especially when you go to new places. So I have to send them pictures of them relaxing on the bed or just looking out the window. And this is from last year. The message that Torty has is this. Slow and steady is great, something that we heard about as we grew up. But when it comes to your dashboards, that typically does not work. Try telling that to your audience, saying, hey, have you heard of slow and steady? That's not going to work. So we're going to actually go through some best practices to make your dashboards feel alive, right? Apply those practices. But let's actually think about why does performance matter? Allow me to kind of just set the context for you. So think about a picture like this about 20 years ago. I think 20 years ago, a lot of people would be like, geek, nerd. It wasn't cool. Data is the new cool today. I'm actually proud to be called a data nerd, data geek, what have you. Why is it? Why is it that we talk about data being the new cool, the new competitive advantage, the new oil, the new currency, the new whatever you call, fill in the blank over here? Why is it? I think it's because the platforms that we have today, platforms like Tableau, allow data to be able to tell the stories that you have with your data. Those stories can be visualizing your work history. That's mine. Those could be visualizing your electricity usage. See, we did something really good there 3 years ago. Or those could be just playing with sports statistics. This is me just kind of playing with NBA data just to see which players truly sit above the rest. as it comes to statistics, right? But I think regardless of the story that you choose to tell with your data, this is what I go by. Every data story should be truthful, purposeful, and engaging. And engaging is the piece that we're actually going to focus on today. So last year, I actually did the same session with as many of you over here. Well, not here, different place. But so many people here kind of wanted to learn about this. And I actually said this quote, one size does not fit all. So through this session, I want to kind of leave you with maybe some quotes, some ideas about what do I do to make sure my dashboards are performant. What I meant by this is let's not try to portray the state of our business in one single dashboard. It doesn't work. Each one of those dashboards has to be purposeful for what it is trying to do. I want to expand that message this year. And I want to say one path does not fit all. What do I mean by that? So I was reading an article about how seven out of the top 10 companies today in terms of revenue are all considered platform companies. Platforms like Amazon, like Facebook, that are allowing the consumers and the producers to come together in ways that we had never imagined before. They're blurring the boundaries between what technology provides you. Now, what does Tableau do in terms of that? If you think about this, I'm going to run through this slide really quickly, but so you can get an idea. You have your data in a bunch of different data sources. If you think about that traditional way of creating some operational reporting, you might be pumping that data into a warehouse. You use a tool like Tableau Desktop, build some dashboards, put it on Tableau server, and then you publish it, and people can use it through the browser, mobile interface, or an embedded portal, right? And that's great. But that's not the only path. If you really think about it, what we are doing today as analysts, as creators of these analytics, or explorers of hidden insights, we might actually be taking a completely different path. We might be having some data in a data lake. This clicker is slow to respond. I'm going to move over here. And it might be using something like Tableau Prep just to consume that data or create some transformations in a way that is more meaningful for me. I push that data source to Tableau server, and maybe I just let people use something like a web edit interface or ask data to ask their own questions. That's an alternative path. In Gartner's terminology, that might be mode 1 and mode 2 analytics. This is bimodal analytics, allowing you to be able to do both. But that's not the only thing. What if there's another path? I have some data in a data warehouse. Those arrows are really dim as I can see it. Hopefully you can see it in the back. But you might be pumping that data into Prep, putting it into Desktop, publishing some dashboards, and people are using web edit. Why I'm doing this is because I think there is no singular path of what we're doing with analytics today. There's different paths that we're doing. Why I think it's important for all of us here, why it is in context of best practices for dashboard performance, is because what you create and how it gets consumed is not one single way. That awareness of how your dashboards are going to get used in a variety of different ways, slicing and dicing, using different filters, that awareness is very important because when you create those dashboards, think about how people are going to use that. That's many different ways. This may be one way, just creating a state of the business, an executive dashboard, or a dashboard that actually allows different people to do their own ad hoc analysis. I'm going to use a category of my choice just to see what the visual looks like. Or people using as data interface to simply just ask questions like, what are my top products by sales in the last 2 years? This is me just publishing some data source and somebody is using it. That needs to be performant as well. Or in the state-of-the-art technology where you can use touch screens and actually interact with the data. This is one of my customers, one of my favorite customers, that actually use Tableau as a backbone to get real-time visibility into their supply chain. My jaw drops every single time I go there. And I think they're here as well. Thank you. Now, why I bring that up is because this is another thing I said last year. As I am thinking and building dashboards, I actually have to put myself into a thought process of I'm a designer, but I'm also a builder. I'm an architect, but I'm also an engineer. Why that's important is because maybe 10 years ago, somebody else was designing the warehouse, somebody else was building a metadata repository, and somebody else was designing the dashboard, somebody else was building it, and then somebody else consumed it. Great, that worked, but it took 6 months to a year just to do something. Now we have platforms like Tableau that allow you to do whatever you want to do. I'm going to pause here. If there is something that you would like to just kind of think about, what is it that we are doing in our organizations that is a little bit different maybe from 5 years ago? What is it that I have to do to think differently to create those dashboards? Take a few seconds to do that. I'm going to switch to the demo portion of actually going and implementing performance into our dashboards. Let's see. All right, there we go. So this is how I, well, not that way. This is how I actually look at various factors. Last year, I created this Scatterplot, and I said, hey, if you put a 2x2 matrix, things to the top right are the ones that you want to focus on. I'm going to try to make it easier this year and just kind of leave you with a list. If you're trying to take a picture, don't worry. This is something that at the end of the presentation, if you do a review, good or bad, I'm going to make sure that you have hands on this. It's actually on Tableau Public. I've already published that there. Because it's not just the picture. You probably are not going to be able to catch the text. Each one of them has a little bit of a commentary, right? Why is this particular thing important for me? Why should I reduce tabular data in my dashboards, or number of sheets, or number of maps, or what should I really do? I'm kind of leaving you with some of this commentary. But we'll get to that. But how I process dashboards is, what are some of the things that can be, sometimes you call it a low-hanging fruit? What are things that I should do to get some quick hits and make my dashboards faster? So I do actually get into conversations with my customers, and they say, this thing is so slow. Can you make it faster? Well, sometimes you cannot. That's possible. But a lot of times you can. And there's been many different instances where I have been able to just kind of look at different dashboards and say, hey, well, what if it did this? What if it did something else? So I'm actually going to tell you another story. If this starts spinning, I'm going to go hit F5 just to see how long this dashboard actually takes. We'll wait for this to appear. I'm actually going to tell you a story. I did get called into a customer. I was at a customer site, and we did the discussion on various things about Tableau and performance, and at the end of like a day and a half, I had some time left. And I said, how should we use this time most effectively for you and your organization? And somebody said, hey, would you like to look at this dashboard that really is slow? Every single time I click on anything, it takes me 30 seconds to a minute. I said, that doesn't seem right. Anything? Yes, anything. I slice and dice, takes a minute. I said, okay, let's look at it. We'll get to the thing that actually made their dashboards better. It was their use of custom SQL. Anybody here know what custom SQL is? Maybe show of hands. Some of you? Okay, many of you. Do many of you actually use custom SQL? If you can kind of give me a sense. Okay. Try not to. Just because we make that possible, to me, doesn't mean that you should use it, and I'll tell you why. It is easier for you to just say, hey, my data warehouse developer, I know we used to do this dashboard and this other tool. What is the SQL that gives you that data? Can you give me that SQL? I'll plug it in. Makes it really easy, right? Copy, paste the SQL, and now I'm doing whatever I want to do. Well, think about the purpose. That custom SQL was maybe producing just a tabular report for somebody, maybe a PDF, what have you. But now that you're creating a Tableau dashboard where people will slice and dice, people will filter, will interact, and use it in ways that you haven't imagined, what really happens is that that custom SQL becomes part of something that Tableau does on top of. And whatever complicated logic is inside that custom SQL, by the way, this is still rendering. I want you to feel the pain. This is the pain that all of your audience is also feeling. And we have a version of the same dashboard, same data, that hopefully, if the live demo works well, will not show us the pain. It will give us that speed of thought analysis, right? But that back to custom SQL, what really happens is that Tableau does its own logic on top of that. So whatever complex logic is inside, it gets executed every single time. We don't want that, okay? And so that story, back to that customer, I looked at it, it was custom SQL. I said, would it be okay if we just actually redesign some things? They said, sure. We took about 15 minutes, did what we can do in Tableau, which is drag and drop a couple of tables, create the joins, put the filter conditions in there. Every single time we did something, it was snappy. Now the lady there, I don't remember her name, but let's say she was Jennifer. She actually looked over to somebody else and she says, John. And John looked at her. He said, looks like we've been doing this all wrong all along. And everybody laughed. But I think that was a moment of realization for me. One tip that actually can change every single thing that they do in their organizations, right? So I want to show you a lot of those tips. Last year you did say, we want to see a lot of these. So what really we want to do is, first things first, some tools for troubleshooting. Who here knows what this does? Start performance recording. Okay, very few of you. You can start using this tool. Very, very, very effective in you understanding what's really going on. What happens is that when I click start, nothing happens on the screen. But something is happening in the background. I assure you, if you don't believe me, you can go back and see the word has changed to stop. I really think we should just put a counter saying, like, we're doing something in the background. But anyway, another discussion. But what's really happening is whatever I do now with this dashboard, let's say I click, and it's going to run a query or many queries, one for each sheet. By the way, painful? Are we feeling the pain? Yes? OK. So every single thing we're doing is being captured behind the scenes. What do I do with this? I skipped this last year. I just showed you what this does, and then never came back to it. So apologies for those of you who were here last year. But I'm going to click stop, just so we can close the loop on this. I think this is very effective. As soon as you say stop, every single thing that happened from start to stop that got captured as data points is now going to be rendered in a Tableau workbook. This is extremely helpful for me. So I'll give you a couple of tips around how I process this. First things first, I don't really care about anything that took less than maybe 0.2 seconds, right? All those things are really fast. I'm OK with that. The second thing that I do is this visual right here in the middle is very helpful because I can quickly see which particular worksheet, the sheet called 7 by cat month not tuned, right? That particular sheet is taking the longest time. How I process this is because if each one of this is, let's say, taking 1 second, but just one of these sheets is taking 20 seconds, I know what I need to tune. Now, within that sheet, there could be multiple factors, but this is first thing that I do. The second thing that I do with this is I actually go into this timeline, and what I bring in here, a small little tip, is if I bring in the start index field that's already part of it as the first field, it actually sorts it based on the chronological order. Because when I hit start and I hit stop, in my mind, I might have already recorded what was I doing. I was clicking here, I was clicking there. So this is now in that chronological order. It gives me some additional context around how to troubleshoot. So hopefully that's helpful. We're going to minimize this because a lot of the discussion today is theoretical on a live demo. But I will mention 2 sessions that will actually take this to practice as well. One, I think, happens today, tomorrow, and day after at 1:15. So I'll mention those towards the end. But let's go back into this and start going through many of these things that I want to show you. So the first one, I think this is the biggest culprit of many of my dashboards. Tabular data. We want to create this row by column grid because finance loves it. Finance wants it. And they have a good reason for it. But many of the times, what they need is that tabular data with some context. What I mean by that is I know how I need to look at my state of the business. One product is not doing very well this particular month. Why? So that basically becomes, let's filter on time, let's filter on a product, and let's break it out by dimensions. So instead of giving this entire view, and by the way, at the very bottom, I should just not hide this. I don't really like this. OK, at the bottom of this Tableau status bar, you will see a number that I think is very helpful for me as I'm troubleshooting. This one says I'm plotting 3.2 million data points on this. That's a lot. I'm going to go hit cancel. I think we've felt enough of the pain here. I'm going to go to the next one. If I had simply just shown, how many am I showing here? Let's see. I think I have a top X filter. If I simply just do top 1,000 or top 10,000, see, this is the live demo part where I was hoping it was like this, and people say, ah. All right, we'll give it a second, and I'll hit refresh because I've done this a few times to know this would work. But essentially, even if I just filter it down to top X, I always say this. Anybody who wants to fight me for it, say, I want that cross tab, and say, sure, we'll make that happen if that's exactly what you need. But can you give me an understanding of what is it that you're going to look for? Because a couple of those Q&A will tell you how should you filter that so you can give them top 10 products, top 10 suppliers, top 10 vendors, top 10 products, what have you. If I go to the next one over here, oh, that one was really snappy. I'm going to go hit F5 really quickly and hover over my mouse just to see how long this one takes. And this one's done. This is 62,000 marks. So that's basically 15,000 rows by 4 columns. I'm still spitting out a lot of data. But you see the impact, right? Having millions of rows versus thousands of rows. That would be my number one tip. Reduce those crosstabs to be more relevant. I'm not asking you to change every single thing. What I've also done is, I'm going to just spend a second here just so you can see the impact of this is quite a bit. So when I was showing all the marks, it took me 32 seconds. When I'm going to 10,000, it's down to 5 seconds, and when I'm just showing top 100 rows, is 1 second. Every single second that your consumers are spending in just looking at these spinning circles, possibly getting distracted, are all the minutes they could be making more meaningful decisions with the data. So top end would be one thing I would do. Let's actually go to the next one. Minimize the number of sheets that are in a dashboard. This goes back to us doing purposeful dashboarding. My rule of thumb is 5. If you really think there are certain things that Tableau was not able to do or your execs really need to look for, maybe go to 10. But I have seen dashboards that go 20, 30 sheets, and I say, what are you trying to do there? Because what you're doing is you're reducing or basically making worse the experience of every single person who's looking at maybe just one of those views, right? So this is simply a discussion. But here's another thing that we're actually going to start looking at. So any dimension that is part of your visual itself, right? Let's say the visual we were looking at was by country. Do I really need the filter by country? Sometimes maybe yes, because the country may be really small. It might be hard to find in the mouse and then click on it. But there are ways that we can change a lot of filter conditions into a dashboard. So we're actually going to go to some of those, and I'll give you an example. So here is a view where, for whatever reason, and I'll tell you why this happens. For whatever reason, I have all of these values selected, but not null, right? This is filter 1 for a field called class flag. I go into location flag, and you see the same thing. I have all the values selected except for null. Now, what's really happening behind the scenes is that each one of these values is being passed in what we call SQL or a SQL-like language, and say, give me all the data for everything except for null. But if I had simply changed a few things, so I don't have to go through each one of these fields to make this point, but if I simply just change the way I'm using these filter conditions, let's go to the tuned version of this and hit F5. Is it back? There we go. Just reversing the logic. You might say, well, you knew that because maybe you've been working with Tableau for a while. How do I know that? So I think one rule of thumb might be think whatever processing Tableau has to do, right? Whatever we need to do, whatever kind of SQL we need to generate, think of doing something that makes that SQL the smallest, right? So if I have to pass 100 different values, that makes a large SQL. If I have to pass a SQL that just says exclude null, that code or SQL will be small. So if you just think in those terms, build in those terms. That makes sense? This is all I did in these two different things. Let's look at the impact of this one. 1 second versus 4 seconds. Sorry about the mouse over here. When I have individual values selected versus, oh, that keeps happening. There we go. This problem actually gets worse based on the number of values you have in a list. So if you have 36 values, like in location flag, and I have selected 35, this might still be very fast. But the longer the list, the bigger the impact. Why it happens is because I'm making you aware of certain things that you might actually be doing without realizing. But before you publish the dashboard for others to consume, maybe use what I showed you earlier as a checklist, right? Do I have my filters in the way they should be? Do I have 5 sheets? If it's 7, it's OK. Nobody's going to police and say, hey, or maybe in the backside, right? You have 7. That's not a problem, as long as you're generally following those principles. So that's why I want to leave you that checklist later on. Let's go to another thing now. So as you can see, we have a lot of things to cover. We have 30 minutes to go. So I'm going to keep going. Let's go to a dashboard where I have tuned some of these filters. And I might have taken one thing out. And if this one is the one that I actually intentionally kept it as slow, then I'll skip and come back to it. Oh, there we go. I actually did a few different things in here. Number one is that I've hidden that crosstab that had 3.2 million marks, right? That's not working. So when I talked about visual filtering, let's see if I can get to it, because somebody might say, you removed something that I need to make my decision. No, I didn't. I just want you to tell me, what do I want to do? What do you want to do? Oh, this May, which looks like we're doing really good for dairy, I want to see that data. Or maybe I want to see this data for poultry in Feb. I have that data, and it came in 1 or 2 seconds. But what I did with this one single tip is I made the experience of everybody else who doesn't care about that crosstab so much better, right? So it is upon you as creator and designer of this dashboard to put a little tip. And sometimes I intentionally kept it blank, but sometimes I put a little tip in red. Say, click on any data point in the heat map to see the details. Because then people are told that they can get to that level of detail. In addition to that, I've removed some of the other filtering mechanisms from here. So I don't want to zoom, but I want to simply just click. So if I'm going to look at the data for snails or poultry or grain, you get the idea. I want to make sure that you know that each one of these dashboards is still going live against the same SQL database, same tables. There is no trickery involved where I created some tables that are just smaller data set. All I did is remove that custom SQL, and we'll go to that. I removed that data at the bottom, and I've done small other improvements to make this experience go from 3 minutes to speed of thought analysis, right? Let's keep going so I can leave you with more of these steps. Let's go to another one here. So I was told, and for whatever reason I could not quantify this, I did it a little bit, so I'll show you that when you create maps, so here, we'll look at maps here. This is data for maps where I'm plotting about 40,000 zip codes, okay? And I have another one, and this took maybe, 3-4 seconds. I'm doing the same thing. It's the same 40,000 zip codes, but that are plotted where the territory of each zip code is plotted out. So I was told that creating these polygons is a little bit more cumbersome for Tableau than just putting a circle where the zip code or the center of the zip code is. So I tried to quantify it, and I said, well, let's see, is it really that much different? So this was me actually just trying to do it last night, and I just said, apparently. It was a bit different, right? So if I'm looking at the individual pieces where we're doing this part like geocoding, if you remember, performance recording spits everything out. So I simply ran the first one, the second one, started the performance recording before, stopped the performance recording, and I moved that worksheet column to the top just to see this is the bubbles and this is the polygons. There was a little bit more processing involved. Was it 1 second to 32 seconds? No, but it was ½ second to 1 second for each individual query. Why I want to mention this again for awareness, if I am trying to find which zip code has highest wages or total wages, and I'm going to go just Alt Tab. Come on, click. Which one quickly tells me, right? I know somewhere there in Northeast. Small little things that can make a lot of difference. So I do want to take you back into that one path does not fit all concept. If you're doing some exploration, you're in that mode 2 analytics mindset, I want to find some hidden insight, and you're just dragging and dropping, seeing what happens, I mean, that's 3 seconds wasted, and that's okay. Whatever works for you is okay. I think a lot of the tips that I'm talking about are the ones when you publish it to others that want to consume this analytics, that's when you want to go back to the checklist. I don't want you to think like, Lavkesh, give us a checklist now, I got to go through this every single time. If I'm an analyst and simply my job was, hey, go look at the data and find something useful, which a lot of managers just pass on to their analysts and say, go find something useful. Another story. But we won't get there. But if you're doing just that, I think it's completely fine for you to do whatever Tableau is drawing. If it's helpful, great. If not, just move on, right? Maybe you wasted 3 seconds, but not 10,000 seconds. Let's go to the next one. All right, this one's a funny one. So I'm just going to discuss it. We used to have a saying internally between Tableau services when we go to customers, and we said, join if you can, blend if you must. It was basically a way to say, please avoid blending at all costs, But there were certain scenarios where you could only use blending. Blending was the only way to make certain things possible. At this point today, with Tableau Prep already there, where you can combine data at different aggregates and just create many different versions of that data, I think just avoid blending at all costs. Blending is another one of those big things that I find in many dashboards, and it's actually very easy to make a mistake with blending. What I mean by that is if you create a dashboard that's based on one data source, and then you start building another view because somebody said, hey, that data is somewhere else. If you just start bringing fields from both the data sources without realizing, Tableau is trying to do blending behind the scenes and automatically finding all the fields that are common. So how do I find that out? We're going to quickly do this part. See, I have many different data sources here, right? So if I choose just one of this and say, OK, go ahead and do sum of sales by, let's say, region, right? And this is the first view. Then all of a sudden, I was just clicking around. I didn't notice, but I was just in this field. And somebody said, hey, that needs to be actually broken out by division flag, right? We'll give it a few seconds. I've not practiced this scenario, but you see what happened over here, right here. The second data source that I selected got a little orange checkbox next to it. Tableau continues to give you a lot of visual cues. First one's always blue checkbox. The second one is orange. The worst example I've seen is 22 oranges within a single view. And then they said it's slow. So, but if you think about the thought process, it was very easy for me to make this mistake, right? To me, this is a mistake. If you know what you're doing with blending, if you know that there is no other way to do that combining of data in prep or using what we call cross-database joins, maybe make a note. That might be an alternative for blending, cross-database joins or prep. You say, I've tried it all. I know what I'm doing. Blending is the way to go. Go for it. If you don't know what blending is and you got these orange checkbox by mistake, time to go back to those workbooks and try to make those better. Okay? All right. So that was blending. Let's go to another one that I think, this one is not as prevalent in the cases that I see with many people, but it can happen, and I know the thought process behind it. This is very easy for you to start clicking at different places in Tableau and then not knowing what happened. I'll give you an example. If I bring class in here as a filter, I think I'll have a lot of values in class. So I'm going to escape out of the class. Let's just do region. Region was a good one. There we go. All right, and I just say I want all values, and that's OK. You see this option? Anybody know what that is? OK, some of you. If the rest of you don't know what that is and don't want to know, you're fine. Why it's easy to make this mistake is, hey, I just click Add to Context because I'm exploring Tableau. That's my nature. My nature is to learn this tool by just clicking around and finding what happens. OK, this might take some time, but then after that, all this does is gives me the same data with that pill becoming gray. What did it really do? I don't know. And I've seen people who are learning Tableau on their own just click Add to Context for many different things. I'm not going to tell you what it does. You can read about it. But if you don't need to know, and you're not doing this intentionally, chances are that you don't need it. It is very powerful functionality, what it does and what it can give you. But if you're not at that point yet, just look if you've been doing this Add to Context. Again, go back to your dashboards. This is another thing that I see. 8 filters, and I said, there's Add to Context. Do you know what you were doing? And there's some people who say, yep, we need to do this, this, and this, and that's why I added to context. I say, good, great. You know exactly what you're doing. But if you don't worry about it. I'm going to get rid of this. I'll show you another example. This is data that I'm looking at, simply breaking it out by manager ID and month, right? But you see this little visual cue. There's these sort icon. This is another thing that I look at. If you show me your dashboard and say, can you make this better? I'll go to different sheets. First, I'll do performance recording. I'll look at the SQL. I used to do a lot of SQL, so I'm very, I'd say, adept at just finding things that are not good within a SQL. And sometimes I'll find sorts, which in a SQL language are simply order by. It'll say, order this data by dimension, some dimension, doesn't matter. But in Tableau, I can see that with this filter. Let's see what that is. I'm actually filtering this by count distinct of long description. This is basically telling me that, hey, I want to find out which managers are standing out, doing some sales within a particular month, but go ahead and sort this by the description of the product or how many different products they were selling. This kind of doesn't make any sense. If I simply take that out, oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Let's go back. See, I told you this is no trickery. It's all going against a database. We'll let this run, and I'm going to go back into the sorting example. All right, we'll let this run. Hopefully, this is not going to be a long one. There we go. All right. If I come back to a different view of that same data, and I do have sort in there, but I'm simply sorting by sum of sales because I want this view to show me towards the top left which are the most impactful managers and which months are they most impactful in. That, to me, makes a business question. The impact of that kind of sorting is also pretty big, right? One little sort that I added for Tableau or a database to do that processing that I didn't need. You might say, what if I had that as a valid question? I wanted that sort for a reason. Then keep it. I'm not asking you to remove functionality, but there's so many times we just add sort because we're clicking. Again, use it as a checklist before you publish. All right. Let's see how we're doing on time. So 17 minutes to go through the other half. I think we can do it. Useful so far? Yes? OK. I'll keep going. So if any of you feel like, hey, we're not kind of getting into the weeds, I want to leave you with some best practices. Getting into the weeds, we have 2 other sessions. One will actually do some of these designing live on stage. That's by my peer, Jason Oakes. I think he's doing it on Friday. And the other one's called Vroom, Performance Tuning Your Dashboards. That's Arrgh, and I think that's 1:15 every single day. So let's go to another one. Connectors. Use native connectors for optimized experience. What do I mean by that? Anybody know what ODBC is? Show of hands, maybe. Many of you. OK, I really hope you don't have to ever use ODBCs with Tableau. The large majority of the databases that you are connecting to may be Teradata, Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, Postgres, Azure Warehouse. Many of the warehouses, either in the cloud or on-prem, we have native connectors for. So use these ones instead and stop using ODBC. And here's the reason why. ODBCs may be built by a third party or may be built by the vendor themselves, like Microsoft building their SQL Server ODBC. But the way the ODBC would work may be a little bit different than how a native connector would work. Our connectivity team works many, many months, sometimes years, optimizing that experience for you. So all the things the database can do, Tableau knows what that database is capable of. And Tableau can optimize the SQL that we send to the database. Why would you not want to use it, right? Again, one of those things is because, hey, something you were doing in the past, right? Somebody says, use this ODBC that I've configured for you, and you should be good. Maybe time for us to just be aware. Just because we did it that way doesn't mean we have to do the same thing now. This is the one that I think, yes, yeah, this is the ODBC one. I wanted for you to really feel the difference between each one of the not tuned versions and the tuned versions. My ultimate last dashboard loads in about 6-7 seconds. This one takes about 9 to 10 seconds. So there is something that was going on in the ODBC that made it a little bit slow. I personally don't know which particular part that was, so I'm not going to speak to that. But it was a little bit slow, so I don't want to use those. Let's keep going. Custom SQL. Maybe show of hands. How many of you want to see how custom SQL works and how I would want to tune it? OK, 36%. So we're going to do it. So this is how custom SQL works. If you have something like this that says custom SQL, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it in a notepad and paste it. Did I copy it? Copy, paste, and let's see, can I actually use formatting here? Maybe, yeah, there we go. So I can use tools like Notepad++, quickly format this to be a SQL statement. What this tells me is that really quickly this point jumped out. I'm aggregating something in the custom SQL already. All right, hold on. Then what I'm doing, I'm joining some tables. I'm filtering out some data where the product category is null. I don't want to look at that. Well, actually not null. So I'm taking all the less meaningful data away from this. And at the end, I'm just simply grouping this by all the different dimensions. This is actually a very valid custom SQL that I might use to create an aggregate. Well, guess what Tableau does? It creates aggregates for you visually. So every single time I'm using this, I'm running a group by on top of this custom SQL. So what would I do? I would simply look at this, and I'll say one table, second table, third table. I know these 1, 2, 3, 4 filter conditions. I'm going to put that as my data source filters, and I'll bring in all of these fields in here. So let's go back into Tableau and look at 3 tables, data source filters. Here's the only change that I've made. I have that table. I have the second and the third table. I've made the right join. That was part of the custom SQL. And every single time I'm using this data source, so I'm going to go ahead and click New Sheet and just bring in, let's say, region. I'm using those filters in here. And those filters are basically set up as data source filters. How do you set up a data source filter? Anytime that you add a filter in here and then pass this option called all using this data source, essentially what it means is that when we're getting the data from the database, we don't want to look at certain things. So it always becomes part of the where criteria, where location ID is not null or product classification is not null. So that's what I would use in here. So I promised that I wanted to do a lot more this year. We're going to run out of time, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. So we just did custom SQL. The next one is data for analysis. This is another one. Minimize using every single thing in your database. If somebody's saying, hey, Mr. Analyst, go find something useful, based on what? I want to see which product is selling very well. When? Last 2 years. OK, you've given me a filter. I'm just going to use last 2 years. Hey, what dimensions should I look at? Hey, look at by location, look at by product classification, look at by manager that's running the region. OK, you're giving me some additional context. I don't have to use the entire data set that I have for my analysis. Small little thing that we sometimes don't use. You can use prep to create the aggregate that you need, right? Filter the columns out, filter the rows out. Here is another one that is very similar to custom SQL. So this one is about the data model. And again, we're going to let this run. I'm going to show you what the difference is here. So this makes more sense. This is 3 tables versus this one. Well, actually, the one that I showed you earlier had 2 tables, which is this right here. The difference is that I've taken a particular table away. So I looked at a dashboard, and I looked at what was going on. There was one column that was used from that 3rd table. That was the long description column. Am I going to do any analysis based on a really long description column? I removed that. And simply just removing that to me gave me, let's see, what's the impact of this one? Let's go back, and here. That one table that I don't need, again, be purposeful with what you're using. Only the tables that you potentially need. This one is a new one. Hidden containers. Anybody know what that is? Some of you. Great thing to use. What a hidden container does is it hides everything that's inside of it. Right? So how to do it? Another session, because we have less time here. But just read 2019-2 came with this feature called hidden containers. It gives you a button for any container to hide filters or even sheets. So if you're hiding a sheet, let's say a cross tab with 3.2 million data points, every single person who's coming there, you're not making their experience bad. Somebody who wants to go there, they can click on this button, which can be a text, and say, you want 3.2 million data points? Click here. Right? And that's when they'll see it. This example, all I'm doing is hiding the filters at the very top. I'm going to use this quite a bit in my performance tuning as well. I think we're doing good on time. So count distinct is another one. Let's talk about the impact of that. I actually got asked a question saying, well, if you don't want to use count distinct, what would you do? So what is count distinct? It basically says, give me the list of distinct products that I'm selling. Give me the list of distinct vendors that I get my products from, right? Distinct list of whatever. That's count distinct. It's actually a really good tool to have for an analyst. I just want count distinct. Here's the problem. The way count distinct works is it requires sorting. If I give you and say, tell me everybody's name here, how many distinct names, first names are in this room? What are you going to do? You're going to ask everybody, say, everybody with the names that starts with A, please come over here, make a line. B, C, D. Within A's, you have to sort again. What's your second letter? You have to sort that way, and anybody, 2 people who both have name Aaron, okay, you're just one name right now. So first I have to sort everybody, and then I have to count the number of groups that I created. It's a compute-intensive process. All I'm asking you to do is just be aware of it, that count distinct is a compute-intensive process, and it can be slow. Somebody asked me, how are you going to make it better? I don't have an answer to it. There are some really good papers that talk about how to solve for count distinct, but not necessarily within Tableau. There's algorithms like somebody said hyperlog-log, then came up another one called hyperlog-log plus, and then came another one called hyperlog-log plus plus. That's a name for something that estimates, an algorithm that estimates count distinct to a really high confidence without using that much compute power, because you just want directional guidance. How do you use that in Tableau? I don't know yet. So I'm still working on finding you an answer for count distincts. But the impact is worth looking at. In my example, there was none. So when I was working on this presentation, I was working hard at showing you very impactful 32 seconds, 1 second, 6 seconds, 1 second. And when I kept working on this one, I was like, I can't show you an impact. But it's still worth looking at for you. It's still worth pointing out. Hey, if I'm doing count distinct on 30,000 rows and there is no impact, hey, I should feel good. Even though Lavkesh said count distinct maybe do not use, I'm fine, right? So again, just awareness can be self-correcting. So if it is a problem, then you can make it better. We're almost at the last tip, and then some thoughts for you. So here is, first let's do this dashboard here. I want to make sure that you leave with that. Well, actually, I want to make sure you don't leave without doing the evaluation. So I'll give you a minute for that. But I want to give you a perspective of this tuned dashboard where I've added all of those different tips, right? If I'm, oh, it's connecting to the data source again, but should be fast enough. There we go. I think I lost my, there we go, selection. There we go, selection, there we go, right? If I'm interacting with this dashboard, right, and I'm clicking anywhere that I want, and I actually have data at the bottom as well. This is that same data with, I believe, 10 million data points in the database that I'm getting that speed of thought analysis. That's what we need to leave with our audience with, right? One last tip that I wanted to talk about, and then we'll go back to our presentation, is that there is another functionality called multi-table extracts that came about a year ago. If you guys don't know a reason why you need to use that, maybe just worth a discussion with somebody else. Why would I? Multi-table extracts create the Tableau extract as different tables, and that means that when that data is joined at the time that somebody runs the dashboard, it can add half a second to it. So you're losing something by gaining something. What you need to remember is if you don't have a use case for multi-table extracts, one of those things like blending and count distinct or context filters, maybe you're not there yet, and that's okay. So we kind of went through all of this. I promise this. If you just look for the keywords, best practices for dashboard performance on Tableau Public under my name, or just look for my name. Hopefully there are not many Lavkesh Babars out there. You will find that. That's for you guys to use as a cheat sheet, if you will. If you don't mind, maybe we take a minute here to do the evaluation. Last year, I paused everybody here, and I said, please just take a minute to do the evaluation. Some of you gave me really good feedback that made this session today better, right? But what I want to leave you with is if you can follow me on the blog here as well. But I think that the main thing that I want to leave you with is the data that tells its stories, or the stories that you want to tell with your data. Think about what you want to do. I urge you to think about these different things so you can make your stories be more impactful as well. So hopefully this was helpful. Here are the other sessions that I mentioned that are worth going into. And with that, thank you, and have a great rest of the conference.